Fluent, period. What if I told you that one of the biggest reasons you still struggle to speak English is because you're trying too hard to speak it correctly? Think about that for a second. Maybe you open your mouth to say something simple, and suddenly your brain freezes. Wait, is it do or does? Should I use the past perfect? Is this grammar correct? What if people laugh at me? And then something terrible happens. You say nothing, not because you don't have ideas, not because you're not intelligent, but because you became afraid of creating language. And that fear is destroying millions of English learners every single day. But here's the strange part. Native speakers break grammar rules constantly. Movies break grammar rules. Songs break grammar rules. Memes break grammar rules. Even children break grammar rules before they ever learn them. So why are learners taught that one tiny mistake is the end of the world? Today, we're going to uncover one of the biggest lies about language learning. And once you understand this idea, your English will never feel the same again. Because by the end of this video, you may finally stop being afraid to speak. And honestly, that might be the moment your real fluency begins. A few months ago, someone asked a very simple question online. The question looked innocent, but hidden inside, it was a problem that almost every English learner has. The person showed a meme, and the meme used a word in a very strange way. A noun was suddenly being used like a verb. Technically, according to grammar books, it was wrong, and the student asked, "Can I really say this in English?" Now, maybe you think this is easy. You probably expect a teacher to say, "No, that's incorrect. End of discussion." But what if the answer is much bigger than that? What if this little meme reveals something shocking about the entire way people learn languages? Let's start with something simple. Imagine I say this sentence, "Don't adult too hard today." You immediately understand it. Even if adult is normally a noun. Nobody is confused. Nobody stops breathing. Nobody calls the grammar police. Your brain instantly understands the meaning. Don't behave like a stressed, responsible adult today. Now let's try another one. My phone died and now I have to human again. That sounds strange, but you still understand it. Why? Because humans are unbelievably good at creating meaning. And this is where things get interesting. Most students believe language works like mathematics. There are rules, formulas, correct answers, wrong answers. And if you memorize enough grammar, eventually you become fluent. But real language doesn't work like that. In fact, if you look closely, language is much messier, much more creative, and much more alive than people think. Let me show you something weird. Every year, new English words appear. Words that didn't exist before suddenly become normal. Google became a verb. Text became a verb. Friend became a verb online. People say things like, DM me, screenshot it, airdrop it, Uber there, Photoshop this. At some point, all of these sounded ridiculous. Imagine hearing Google it for the first time in the 1990s. A grammar teacher might have said, "That's incorrect. Google is not a verb." But today, nobody cares, because language follows humans. Humans do not follow language. That changes everything. And yet, millions of learners spend years terrified of making tiny mistakes. Why? Because school trained them to fear errors more than silence. And silence is the real enemy. Think about children for a moment. Children say things like, "I goed there," "She eated it," "He run away." Those sentences are technically wrong. But no child stops communicating because of grammar fear. Children create language bravely. That's why they improve so fast. Meanwhile, adults often do the opposite. Adults wait, analyze, translate, judge themselves, delete sentences in their minds before speaking. And then they wonder why speaking feels impossible. Here's something nobody tells you. Fluency is not built by avoiding mistakes. Fluency is built by surviving mistakes. That's a massive difference. Because communication is not about perfection. Communication is about meaning. And humans are incredibly flexible with meaning. Have you ever watched a movie where someone spoke broken English, but you still understood almost everything? Of course you have, because your brain doesn't need perfect grammar to understand ideas. It looks for patterns, context, emotion, intention. That's how communication really works. Now, does grammar matter? Of course it does. Grammar is useful, Grammar can make communication clearer, faster, more precise. But grammar is not the heart of language. Meaning is. And confusing those two things creates fear. Let's go deeper. Imagine two people. Person number one speaks with perfect grammar, but is too afraid to speak often. Person number two makes mistakes constantly, but communicates every day. Who becomes fluent faster? Almost always the second person. Because language is a skill of movement, not observation. You cannot learn to swim only by reading books about swimming. And you cannot become fluent only by studying rules. At some point, you must jump into communication. Messy communication, imperfect communication, human communication. And this is where many English learners get trapped. They think fluency is permission. They think, one day, after enough study, I will finally deserve to speak. But language doesn't work like a driving license. Nobody gives you official permission. You become fluent by participating before you feel ready. That's uncomfortable, but it's true. Now here's the really crazy part. Almost every sentence ever spoken in human history was created for the first time. Think about that. Right now, somewhere on Earth, somebody is saying a sentence nobody has ever said before. Language is created by nature. You are not simply repeating grammar patterns like a robot. You are generating meaning in real time. That's one of the most incredible human abilities. And honestly, people don't appreciate it enough. Imagine trying to explain memes to someone from 300 years ago, or internet slang, or emojis, or modern jokes. Language evolves constantly because humans evolve constantly. And the people who shape language are not grammar books. They're ordinary people. You, me, everyone. But schools often teach language like a museum object, frozen, untouchable, dangerous to modify. And that creates something tragic. Students become afraid of experimentation, afraid of sounding stupid, afraid of not being perfect. So instead of communicating, they hide. Maybe this has happened to you before. You knew the answer in English. You had the vocabulary, but your mind suddenly started checking grammar, then checking pronunciation, then checking verb tense, then checking if your sentence sounded natural. And by the time you were ready, the conversation was already over. That feeling is painful, especially because you know you are smarter than your English level. You know there's a real personality trapped inside your silence. And that frustration slowly becomes insecurity. But listen carefully. Your mistakes are not proof that you are bad at English. Your mistakes are proof that you are building English in real time. That's what learners do. And honestly, even native speakers create weird sentences constantly. Have you ever heard native speakers argue about grammar online? It happens every day. Because language is not a perfect machine. It's a living thing. And living things are messy. Now, I want to tell you about something fascinating. There are thousands of languages in the world, and many of them were never fully written down. No official grammar books, no diccionaries, no language apps, no YouTube teachers. And yet, people still communicate perfectly inside those languages. Families laugh together. People tell stories. People fall in love. People argue. People create poetry without official grammar authorities. Why? Because communication comes first. Rules come later. That completely changes the way we should think about learning English. Instead of asking, is this sentence perfect? A better question is, can people understand my meaning? Because if they can understand you, communication already happened. And that's powerful. Now, before someone misunderstands this video, let's clarify something important. This does not mean grammar is useless. No, grammar helps a lot. Grammar can make your speech clearer and smoother. But grammar should support communication, not destroy your confidence. That's the difference. Too many learners treat grammar like a prison. But grammar should be a tool. Imagine un musician. A musician studies music theory. But during a live performance, the musician is not thinking, wait, is this chord theoretically optimal? No, they play. They feel. They communicate emotion. Language works similarly. You study, you practice, then eventually you communicate freely. And yes, mistakes happen. That's normal. Actually, let me tell you something surprising. Some mistakes even make people sound more human. Because real conversations are imperfect, native speakers hesitate, restart sentences, forget words, use slang incorrectly, mix structures, change direction mid-sentence. Real speech is chaotic sometimes, but learners often imagine native English as some perfect robotic performance. That illusion creates unnecessary pressure, and pressure kills confidence. That's why many learners can understand English perfectly, but panic when speaking. Their brains became trained to search for errors instead of meaning. And if your brain constantly searches for errors, speaking becomes exhausting. But the moment you shift your focus toward communication, everything changes. Suddenly English feels lighter, more natural, more alive. You stop treating every conversation like an exam. And this is exactly why some people improve incredibly fast after moving abroad. It's not magic. It's not because they suddenly memorize grammar faster. It's because survival forces communication. They stop waiting for perfection. They start creating meaning immediately, and their brains adapt. Now here's something extremely important. If you want fluency, you must become comfortable with ambiguity. Sometimes you will not know the perfect word. Sometimes your sentence will sound strange. Sometimes you will invent weird expressions accidentally. And that's okay, because communication is cooperative. The listener helps you understand. You help the listener understand. Humans naturally work together to create meaning. That's what conversations really are. Collaborative meaning creation, not grammar competitions. And honestly, this realization can completely change your confidence. Because suddenly, speaking English stops feeling like walking through a minefield. You no longer panic over every tiny mistake. Instead, you focus on connection, meaning, expression. Now, if this idea already feels different from the way you learn English in school, subscribe to Fluent, period. Because most people don't fail at English because they are unintelligent. They fail because they were taught to fear communication itself. And on this channel, we're trying to break that fear. Because fluency is not about becoming perfect. It's about becoming free. Now let's talk about something strange humans do. We worship dictionaries. People treat dictionaries almost like sacred books. If a word is inside the dictionary, it's real. If it's not, people think it's fake. But think carefully about this. Who creates words? The dictionary? Or humans? Obviously humans. Dictionaries simply observe language after people already use it. The dictionary is not the boss of language. It's more like a historian. It records what humans are already doing. That changes the entire relationship between language and authority. And honestly, this should feel liberating because it means language belongs to people, not institutions, not grammar police. People. Now, of course, certain situations require more formal English. A job interview, an academic paper, a business presentation. In those situations, grammar accuracy becomes more important. Absolutely. But casual communication, internet culture, friend conversations, those spaces are creative playgrounds. That's why memes are so powerful. Memes constantly bend language rules. And yet people understand them instantly. Why? Because humans are experts at extracting meaning from context. Your brain does this automatically every day. Even now, you're not analyzing every grammar structure in this video consciously. You're absorbing meaning. That's how language naturally works. And honestly, once learners understand this, their fear starts disappearing. Because they realize communication is not a test. It's participation. Now I want you to imagine something. Imagine a world where babies refused to speak until their grammar became perfect. Human civilization would collapse instantly. No child learns language that way. Children experiment fearlessly. They imitate, guess, invent, adapt, and slowly their communication improves. Adults could learn much faster if they allowed themselves to behave more like learners again. But ego gets in the way. Adults hate sounding foolish. And unfortunately, that pride slows learning dramatically. Because every fluent speaker you admire, every confident English speaker was once terrible. Every single one. They survived awkward moments, embarrassing mistakes, wrong pronunciations, broken sentences. That's part of the process. not evidence of failure. And honestly, some of your funniest memories in English will probably come from mistakes. That's normal. Language learning is messy because humans are messy. And that's beautiful. Now here's a question nobody asks enough. Why do people remember emotional conversations better than grammar exercises? Because emotion strengthens memory. Meaning strengthens memory. Human connection strengthens memory. That's why real communication accelerates learning so powerfully. Not because it's grammatically perfect, but because it's meaningful. Your brain prioritizes meaningful experiences. So if your entire English journey becomes nothing but grammar correction, your brain eventually associates English with stress. And stressed brains communicate worse. This is one reason why some learners suddenly speak better after relaxing. Their fear temporarily disappears. And when fear disappears, communication flows. That doesn't mean you stop studying. It means you stop worshiping perfection. There's a huge difference. Study grammar. Improve pronunciation. Expand vocabulary. Absolutely. But never let those tools convince you that your voice is not allowed to exist until it becomes flawless. Because if you wait for flawless English before speaking confidently, you may wait forever. Even native speakers are imperfect. Even teachers are imperfect. Even professional writers disagree constantly about language. And honestly, that's a sign that language is alive. Now think back to the beginning of this video. That strange meme. That incorrect sentence. Why'd it work? Because meaning succeeded. The human brain connected the idea instantly. Communication happened. And at the end of the day, that's what language was invented for. Not to impress grammar books. Not to satisfy internet critics. But to transfer meaning between minds. That's the real miracle of language. Right now, sounds and symbols are entering your brain and creating ideas. That's unbelievable when you truly think about it. Humans took invisible thoughts and built systems capable of sharing them. That ability changed civilization forever. So don't reduce language to fear. Don't reduce it to red correction marks on paper. Don't reduce it to anxiety every time you open your mouth. Language is bigger than that. Language is creativity, connection, emotion, storytelling, humor, identity, and most importantly, language is human. So the next time you hesitate to speak English because you're afraid of making mistakes, remember this. Perfect grammar has never been the true goal of communication. Meaning is, if people understand you, if you connect, if you express something real, then your English is already doing something powerful. And ironically, the moment you stop obsessing over perfection is often the moment your English finally starts sounding natural. Because confidence creates fluency far faster than fear ever will. So speak, even if your voice shakes, even if your grammar isn't perfect, even if your sentence feels strange. Create meaning anyway, because every fluent speaker on earth started exactly there. And the people who become fluent are not the people who avoid mistakes forever. They're the people who keep communicating despite them. That is the real secret. And once you truly understand it, English stops feeling like a school subject and starts feeling like what it really is, a tool for being human.